What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jobbers and Goons, and we've been balling in the spooky season. I think I've posted like 15 days straight of videos. I don't plan on breaking that streak anytime soon. And today, we're here to revisit something that was pretty popular on its first attempt. I have made SCP content before, but nothing like straight up with them in the title, I don't think. And I made a Could the SCP Contain Doomsday? And people absolutely love that video. So we're back again with another SCP Foundation versus another character. Now today, the character in question is Carnage from Marvel Comics, who's been up to some crazy shit. So we're going to review his case and figure out, could the Foundation contain SCP Carnage? Before we get into this, smash the like buttons, run it up as much as you can. The more likes and comments the video gets, the better it helps my channel grow. We're on the road to 30K, so definitely tune in and become a member of Goon Nation. With that out the way, let's begin. Now, first up to talk about is Carnage, and I want to get something out of the way that we kind of need to address, because I know I'm crossing over fan bases here when I'm doing SCP and comics sometimes, so I want to address something I think a lot of SCP fans will be concerned about. If we're talking classic Carnage, like from back in the day, decades ago, pretty easy solve, actually, for the SCP Foundation, even some of their weaker foundations. Another thing I didn't really properly addressed in the first video, and I apologize. Shout out to all the fans that have been helping me compile all the SCP content and all the information, but there's different versions of the SCP Foundation throughout the verse. There's not really a canon. Everyone's just doing their own shit. It's literally a fan-made megaverse. So there are different SCP Foundations more capable than the other ones. There can be some that like struggle with world busters. Then there's others that easily take down time-space busters. You know, it's levels to this shit, basically. And classic Carnage was not strong enough to be too particularly big of an issue for the likes of the SCP Foundation, even their weaker ones. They would be able to contain earlier incarnations of Carnage. He had weaknesses to stuff like sound and fire. He wasn't too crazy powerful in general. So just getting that out the way, early Carnage and regular Carnage, for the most part, pretty much every SCP Foundation can take him down pretty easily. But we need to talk about a different Carnage. Current Carnage. This is a Carnage that became aware of what the symbiote's true nature is. It serves as a weapon for Null to conquer creation, you know, the King in Black. Carnage, after seeing this, was like, fuck that, I'm becoming the King in Red, and decided to go around absorbing powers to eventually get to Null level, and he did recently kill Null, which brings us to this video, because what happened in the comic in Death of the Venomverse, by the way, go read it, fucking banger, when Null went down, there was a multiversal hit team and research team, almost like an SCP Foundation. They were the anti-Carnage squad. It was made up of anti-Venoms, Venoms, and Carnages from across the multiverse, trying to stop 616 Carnage. And they compiled all the facts about him, they did their best to understand his powers and track him. In this scenario, they gave up. They gave up in the comics once he beat Null. They're like, fuck this, we're out. They had no answer for him. But this time, they have passed on their information to SCP. They went to another universe and discovered the SCP Foundation. And they said, you know what, you fuckers think you know how to do all this science shit and supernatural shit and how to catch things? Contain this bastard, because he's destroying everything. So the SCP Foundation has been given information on King and Red Carnage with a breakdown from the task force, and has been left to be the ones to contain Carnage, as Carnage will now be coming for the SCP verse to get more powerful. So how does this go down? What is the information they will get? Let's talk about what Carnage can do. First of all, this Carnage is one that is above fate, time, space, and even stories. We saw someone who weaves the multiverse of webs of fate, story, and destiny, right? And can see everything throughout the timelines. When Carnage, King and Red, started balling out, his timeline, his story, his fate, his destiny, all that webbing was gone. Instead, it was just Carnage. He can literally take away your perception of his story and what's going on. What's he absorbed and what powers did he get? Well, among these include the likes of absorbing Hydra Man, an Omega level universal medium, which allows both contact to basically all the water, moisture, and all those particles throughout the universe to be controlled by him and potentially used by him. That helps the fluidity of his symbiote, as well as protecting him from other weaknesses like fire. He also goes on to possess Hellhounds. Hellhounds giving him access to realms he couldn't go to prior. he has also taken over the likes of Spot's powers, which allows him to bypass time, space, and dimensionality, and can go anywhere with that kind of teleporting and portal power. On top of this, this would also give him a dimension to go back to should he be absolutely defeated or destroyed. That's how Spot's powers work. On top of this, he went to Malekith, got the code for God of Light. Venom basically able to hunt down any power he wants to at that point, and robbing Malekith is crazy in itself. And at that point, Hela even said, "We can't control Carnage. This is a weapon beyond our power. We just merely pretty much have to trick it at this point." This insane journey he's going on, including hopping universe to universe, slaughtering all the Venoms, because he believes Venom's a bitch. And when Venom got to come up against Null, he's like, fuck that. I can't let Venom seem realer than me. I'm taking down every Venom that thinks they're real. He began perfecting his skills and craft as a god killer across the multiverse. This includes observing powers and taking powers from hell power users, heaven-based weapons, angels, any form of the Venom he came into contact with, which included, like I said, a literal Hellbrand type of power. He just absorbs it. He also faced a lightning god symbiote that allegedly had control of the heavens, and he just tanked that shit. What he's done is overcome all of his potential weaknesses while perfecting all of his strengths, becoming a symbiote god, king in blood. And he even went to the forge that made the likes of Mjolnir, which you guys know how broken Mjolnir is, and he had his own replica of the fucking all-black Null sword made, the All-Blood. And this all led to him eventually pulling up on Null. Null, the god of symbiotes, the king in black, the eldritch god that grew up with Phoenix, right? He's fucking broken. And he gets the hands put on him. I'm talking the paws put on him by Carnage. Carnage is also dealing with the likes of the Task Force at this point and the alternate Avengers, while also dealing with Null and his army of Celestials. He was one-tapping and one-shotting controlled Celestials, and then he one-shot Null and absorbed his power, which obviously could give him control over symbiotes, easily go wherever he wants throughout creation. This gives him the power of a literal void god. He's absolutely broken, and I feel like we've done a good job covering what this current Carnage is and addressing the Carnage case in general. With what we know he's capable of, let's get into our breakdown of what the Foundation brings, and then we will get into how they can address Carnage. The SCP Foundation is a foundation hailing from the SCP verse. This verse is unique in nature compared to pretty much everything else we cover on my channel, because unlike most verses, this doesn't really have a canon. You see, the SCP verse is a verse that is composed of hundreds to thousands of individual authors, creating their own ideas, monsters, horror projects, case files, lore, and cosmology within the verse. This gives us a multitude of SCP things to discuss. And what I mean by that is, we have several different foundations, kind of like how I mentioned that Carnage has different incarnations that are significantly stronger or weaker. So does the SCP Foundation. So let's kind of go over what they deal with and what they have dealt with across the multiverse of SCP. So first of all, these scientists are crazy. And while they don't all, scale to this insane degree, like there are varying degrees of power within the multiverse, SCP Foundations have done simple things as having a literal black hole SCP as a trash can. They have gone on to, typically, it started off with, world destroying threats were hard to contain. Other SCPs had to be used against them. But it also gets a lot more extreme in other cases of the Foundation. You see, there is a massive cosmology within the SCP. And to kind of keep things simple, because we're talking about could they contain, let's talk about what the strongest SCP Foundation level is. The SCP Foundation, at its strongest, the strongest iteration, so to speak, would be considered a Tier 5. Now, why is that important? Because there are layers beneath it. For example, like the Noosphere. The Noosphere is important because you could consider it a Jungian archetypal conceptual place. What that means is it's completely devoid of time and space, completely transcends dimensions, and it cannot be put in the human landscape. It is a perfect sphere compared to all dimensions. This could also be called platonic in nature. It has references to both, plus detailed reports of how both fit into the conceptual cosmology of the noosphere. At worst, you would call it baseline outer, but you can easily get it into the outer ranges. They have captured SCPs and weaponized SCPs within this layer. On top of that, in other layers, including the Infoverse, which incalculably transcends the verses below, like the noosphere, which I mentioned. This is crazy because to weaponize and use beings within the infosphere, they're at least high outer. Like the SCP has access to beings that are high outer at their best, and they can take them out or use them to take out other SCPs. So while the SCP Foundation did kind of start off as semi-grounded when it came to the horror aspects, obviously the cosmology got a lot crazier. And it gives us a really fun way to kind of get a rundown on what the SCP Foundation has accomplished in terms of the multiverse. And while we have ranges from as much as like world to universe busters to even high outer, that gives us a lot to work with. So with the SCP kind of briefly explained, talking about how the Foundation works, what they've come to battle with over the years, let's get into the final analysis in which we review cases similar to King and Blood Carnage, and we discuss whether or not, yes, the Foundation could get it done. Let's do this. As we get into this epic conclusion, I can't help but think about I really kind of need to do a SCP cosmology video, or at least take a stab at it. If you guys want to see something like that, if you want to explore the cosmology of SCP, let me know in the comment section down below and let me know with the like button. But back to this. Let's talk about some cases that are somewhat similar to Carnage that have occurred in the SCP verse that the Foundation has had to deal with, and let's find out if they could have ways to handle Carnage and if it overall, in my opinion, would contain him. Now, first I want to talk about is actually something called SCP-294. Why is this important of an SCP? Well, this is an SCP, like I mentioned before, the Foundation manipulates a lot of SCPs and uses them to contain others. SCP-294 is this anomaly that is a coffee pot, but not just any coffee pot. You see, this coffee pot is capable of producing not just coffee, liquids, it can produce body parts, it can produce objects, abstract concepts and ideas, an insane amount of things it can produce. But the reason this is very important is because when we're talking about what it produces, it doesn't make it. It takes something. Why is that important when considering someone like Carnage? Well, Carnage is a character who's been absorbing powers and taking certain concepts. If they can use that coffee pot correctly, they could actually abstract and take away certain things from Carnage that he's absorbed due to the fact that they have that coffee pot and they have information from the multiversal hit squad on Carnage that would help them prepare for this as well. Let's talk about SCP-826, right? This is a reality manipulating entity that essentially whatever you write in it, kind of like how I said SCP-001 in the Doomsday video, controls what is real. It can control time, physics, all that. This can make things real when it comes to creating narratives or changing narratives for characters. However, I'm not confident in this method, I'll straight up say it, because this is a method that likely gets negged by current Carnage's story and fate and essentially any kind of forging or changing of a story to be able to occur at all. In fact, he completely negated seeing any of the multiverse's fates that had anything to do with him. All you see is Carnage. So they would try to change it and they would just see Carnage. I actually firmly believe that would occur. There are other SCPs that can literally delete SCPs from existence by deleting them from the database. You could try to argue that would potentially work on Carnage. I definitely could see a couple of ways being more effective than others. Containment, in my opinion, would best be suited in this kind that goes into rounding out the conclusions. Well, let's get this out the way. Most SCP Foundations can't handle this Carnage. He's probably too much, just too extreme in power. However, the higher level ones, the ones that have dabbled with taking down beings from the noosphere or infosphere, the higher levels of the Foundations throughout the multiverse have a multitude of ways. I definitely see the implementation of SCPs, including the one that can take away and produce different materials, objects, whatever you put in that damn coffee pot to come away from Carnage. They could potentially start taking away the different powers he has at his disposal. I do think they could potentially contain him. It's easier than the Doomsday situation, in my opinion. The higher levels of SCP should have ways of either writing or creating universes, new stories, new monsters, new outcomes to eventually take away the powers of Carnage and overwhelm him. However, containing's very hard. It might end up being they just have him BFR'd or they put him against someone that is another SCP capable of fighting him. I do think they have a lot more chance at success, however, than they did against Doomsday. And I probably do see them taking down Carnage because of the information provided by the multiverse of Venoms. They would know how to go about taking apart his powers. They have dealt with entities that can do what Carnage has done. I'm just going to put that out there. Like that's a fact. There are foundations that have encountered this. So that's definitely possible. In the end, I think my overall conclusion would be if they didn't have the information, it would be a lot harder. However, getting him in the database using reality warping, they'd be able to figure out his story and access information to how to see his story. If not from Carnage himself, because of his negation of seeing his story, fate, anything he does in the multiverse, they could go to other characters. They could go to find out where he came from in terms of realms. Several ways to find out more information on him. It'd be a lot harder without the information on Carnage, but once they get that information, I would say there are certain foundations throughout the SCP multiverse that could probably get it done and contain him. So I will say they take him down highest of difficulties. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think of this video. Also, let me know what kind of SCP related content you want to see on the channel. If you want to see King and Red Carnage take on the SCP monsters and go on a gauntlet, let me know in the comment section down below. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Shout out to the spooky season, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.